Welcome to Danish English Special Report on fashion's dark side of second-hand sales. In this Danish-InfoNews TV special report, we look at European clothing consumption, waste, and the rise of second-hand fashion. The fashion industry is at a critical crossroads. Across Europe, clothing consumption is higher than at any point in history, with record levels of production, waste, and environmental strain. Fast fashion, driven by rapidly changing trends and low-cost production, has created a cycle of overconsumption that the planet's resources cannot sustain. At the same time, a counter-trend is emerging: the rise of the second-hand clothing market. It was once a niche segment. It is now a significant force, offering economic, environmental, and cultural benefits. Yet, with its growth, particularly through online resale platforms, which comes with new social risks, including harassment, privacy breaches, and image misuse. This report examines these intertwined dynamics, presenting the latest data, assessing the environmental and social implications, and outlining concrete recommendations for creating a fashion economy that is both sustainable and safe for all participants. Conclusion. The evidence is clear. Europe's current pattern of clothing consumption is unsustainable and socially problematic. While the growth of second-hand fashion offers a promising path forward, reducing waste, conserving resources, and fostering individuality, though it is not without its challenges. Online resale platforms must take stronger measures to protect users. Regulators must ensure consistent enforcement of safety standards, and consumers must make more intentional, informed choices. The transformation of the fashion sector will require more than individual goodwill. It demands coordinated action from policymakers, industry leaders, digital platforms, and the public. If addressed with urgency and cooperation, the fashion industry can become a model for a truly secular and ethical economy. Let's look at a report on European clothing consumption, waste, and the rise of second-hand fashion. Executive summary. Europeans are purchasing and discarding clothes at an unprecedented levels, placing significant strain on environmental resources and contributing to textile waste challenges. Simultaneously, second-hand clothing consumption is rising, driven by growing environmental awareness, economic factors, and changing consumers' preferences for unique styles. However, the increased use of online resale platforms has introduced new social risks, including harassment, privacy violations, and non-consensual use of user images. This report examines current trends, environmental impacts, social challenges, and recommendations for sustainable and safe engagement in clothing sector. First, we look at clothing consumption and waste in Europe. Data from European Environment Agency EEA shows that European citizens purchase an average of 19 kilograms of clothing annually, which is a record high and an increase from 17 kilograms per person in 2019. This volume is equivalent to a large suitcase filled with apparel, footwear, and textiles. Clothing retention periods are decreasing, with approximately 16 kilograms per person discarded each year. Disposal methods include incineration, landfill, and export to Asia and Africa, destinations where the ultimate fate of these textiles is often unknown. In Denmark alone, overproduction leads to the incineration of 677 tons of unsold, brand-new clothing annually. The textile industry accounts for an estimated 10% of global CO2 emissions, highlighting the sector's environmental burden. Second on the list, fast fashion and its environmental impact. The fast fashion model, low-cost garments produced rapidly, in response to shifting trends, drives overconsumption and shortens clothing lifespans. The system accelerates waste generation and undermines sustainability initiatives. Experts advocate for a shift toward producing higher quality clothing designed for durability and reuse. EU-level legislation could support this transition by setting minimum quality standards for textiles sold in the single market. Third, growth of second-hand clothing markets. The popularity of second-hand clothing is increasing, supported by multiple factors. Environmental and climate awareness. Purchasing second-hand reduces the environmental footprint by saving water, energy, and chemicals. Economic benefits. Access to quality and designer clothing at reduced prices. Unique styles. Availability of vintage and retro items not typically found in mainstream retail. Increased accessibility, proliferation of physical thrift stores, flea markets, and online platforms such as DBA, Reshopper, and Tice. Charitable support. Many second-hand outlets are operated by non-profit organizations, creating additional social benefits. However, in Denmark, there remains a disparity between the number of people buying used clothing and those selling it. This imbalance limits the potential for reuse and recycling to further reduce environmental impacts. Fourth, risks associated with online second-hand platforms. While online resale platforms have expanded the second-hand market, they have also created environments where users, particularly women, face increased risks of harassment, privacy breaches, and the non-consensual use of personal images. On the first, harassment and sexualized messaging. An investigation by The Guardian's Channel 4 and others have revealed persistent patterns of unsolicited, sexualized communication targeting female sellers. Examples include requests to model garments without underwear, offers of money in exchange for sexual activity, demands for intimate images unrelated to the listed items. The direct messaging systems on these platforms, combined with limited vetting, allow offenders to contact users with minimal barriers. Banned users can often re-register with ease. Image theft and misuse. Image theft is a growing concern. Public and private groups such as the Telegram channels Girls of Vinted and Vinted Slots have hosted thousands of images taken from sales listings repurposed in sexualized contexts without consent. Victims include Bella, a 26-year-old student from Berlin who was targeted on Girls of Vinted, resulting in a flood of offensive multilingual messages. Sonia, a 32-year-old lawyer and Vinted user since 2011, who described the harassment as a digital version of the street. Mina, a 22-year-old from Cologne, whose images originally posted to sell clothing were falsely used to depict her as an adult content creator, damaging her online reputation. Before being shut down, Girls on Vinted had around 2,000 members, predominantly male, many of whom targeted women in the images. Through further harassment on Vinted, privacy vulnerabilities. Sales images may reveal more than intended. Even without showing faces, certain poses, garments, or backgrounds can make images sexualized or identifiable when combined with other online data. Personal details such as names, addresses, or information visible on shipping labels can also be exploited if intercepted. Algorithmic content promotion can exacerbate the risk. For example, listings from female sellers may be shown to users who have not actively searched for them based on inferred interests, inadvertently exposing them to potential harassers. Platform responses and limitations. Vinted maintains a zero-tolerance policy on sexually explicit harassment and has implemented measures to Remove offending content and accounts upon notification. Advise users to avoid showing their face in images. Encourage withholding personal information from messages and labels. However, platform safeguards have limits. Offenders often reappear under new accounts, and removing stolen images from third-party sites is only partially successful. Legal protections. The EU's Digital Services Act, effective February 2024, obligates platforms to remove flagged illegal content, including non-consensual sexualized imagery. National laws, such as Section 264D of the Danish Penal Code, criminalize sharing images without consent when it may harm the depicted person. Despite these protections, enforcement is inconsistent, and victims bear much of the responsibility for monitoring and reporting misuse. Recommendations for sustainable and safe practices. For consumers, purchase high-quality garments designed for durability. Prefer second-hand items over new purchases. Repair and maintain clothing rather than discarding it. Choose items made from single-fiber materials to facilitate recycling. Sort and recycle textiles properly. Donate or resell clothing in good condition responsibly. Limit personal details and identifiable imagery in online listings. Promptly report harassment or inappropriate content to platforms operators. For policymakers and industry, establish mandatory quality standards for textiles sold in the EU. Promote circular economy principles in the textile sector. Strengthen monitoring and enforcement of online harassment laws. Support public awareness campaigns about safe and sustainable second-hand shopping. Conclusion. Europe's clothing consumption patterns are unsustainable in their current form. The growing second-hand market represents a valuable opportunity to reduce environmental impact, but must be supported by stronger safeguards to protect users from harassment, image misuse, and privacy violations. A coordinated response involving consumers, industry stakeholders, regulators, and advocacy groups is necessary to transition towards a clothing economy that is both environmentally sustainable and socially safe. We are living in a time when the clothes we wear carry not only personal meaning, but also environmental and social consequences. Staying informed is the first step toward making choices that matter for the planet, for society, and for ourselves. If you find this report insightful, subscribe to our updates for in-depth analysis, policy briefings, and exclusive interviews with sustainability experts. Together, we can reshape the way we produce, buy, and value clothing, one informed choice at a time. Subscribe now to stay at the forefront of sustainable fashion change. Thank you for watching.